comfortable in our seat. Take a few deep breaths to really kind of bring your awareness to the body sitting here. Scan the body just to see what's going on with it. Check out the sensations of your foot or both of your feet on the ground or on the cushion. And just bring your awareness slowly upward, up the legs. Trying to appreciate what you receive from these body parts. And check in with the hips and the belly, the lower back. And up to the diaphragm and the rib cage. Feeling the lungs fill and deflate. And then your attention to your upper back, your shoulders, the back of the neck. The front of the neck, down your arms to your hands and fingers. Just appreciating all that you can do with your hands, your arms. And bringing your attention to your head resting upon the neck. And your awareness of your spine. Trying to sit up straight, keeping the back straight. Noticing your face, any of the muscles of the face tight, your forehead, trying to soften around the eyes and the mouth. And then settle your attention on the sensation of the breath going in and out of the body, either at the tip of the nose or as your belly rises and falls. Nothing else to do. Just following the breath in and out. And allow the reason that you showed up this morning to bubble up in the mind. And try to generate a positive motivation, a firm intention to use your time well. And then return your attention to that sensation of the breath. So we've been thinking about how to develop affection for more sentient beings, not just the ones in our family or those that we consider our friends, or our children, and the friends of our children, but expanding outward. So we begin by thinking about how the body has many causes and the consciousness has causes. The causes for the body we can trace back to the sperm and egg of our parents. But then that goes back to their parents, our grandparents, and then great-grandparents, and then great-great-grandparents. No beginning. And the cause of the mind is just a previous moment of mind. We can't be here today unless there's a cause for us. Something we can trace back infinitely into the past. And our mind stream just keeps going. Our present life mother hasn't always been our mother. In previous lives, in different rebirths, other beings have been our mothers. And when you think of infinite lifetimes, there's plenty of time for all the countless number of beings to have been our mothers, to have been our fathers, to have been our best friends, our most loved ones. At some time or another, every being has cared for us when we were helpless, when we couldn't do a thing for ourselves. Every sentient being is just a mind stream in a body. And that mind stream has lived in other bodies before. And our mind stream has lived in other bodies. Try to get this feeling that we haven't always been who we are now. We've been other people, and other beings have also been other people, and we've had different relationships with them. We feel cut off from strangers only because we don't remember our past lives. We can bring any image of a person we know to our mind and just think how it's just a mind stream in a body. And that body changes life after life after life after life. So bring to mind any person you felt was the kindest to you as a child. It might be your mother or father, or an aunt or uncle or grandparent, or even a teacher, whoever you just remember as being so kind to you as a child. Just open the mind a little to let the love and care and affection that others have given to you seep in. Not trying to find someone perfect, not someone who's always there when we need them, but someone who holds us with affection in their heart. Try to allow your affection for them to arise. Your gratitude for their kindnesses. And imagine that we've felt this way and received affection this way from countless beings. Just give that idea a little play in the mind. Recognizing that all of our happiness comes from all these beings who have been so kind to us at one time or another in our infinite lives. But starting with that most kind being from this life, allow that wish to repay their kindness to arise in the mind. Not seeing this as a burden or an obligation, just something we really want to do. We want to be able to expand our hearts, filling it with this affection we can feel for those who've been kind to us in this life, those whom we've been able to depend upon, who've helped us when it was difficult. Really cultivating this affection. And we start with those close to us, our friends, our loved ones, and wishing them all to be well and happy. And not just the temporary happiness of samsara, having good jobs and security and good relationships, but really wishing for them to meet the Dharma, gain realizations, and be liberated from cyclic existence. And this desire for them to be liberated comes out of our strong compassion, wishing our loved ones never to suffer, not even the suffering of pain, the suffering of the body or the mind, but the suffering of change, and just the all-pervasive suffering of cyclic existence. So all the beings that we have affection for, allowing that feeling of great compassion to arise for them, wishing them to be completely liberated from all types of suffering. And with practice, this cultivation of affection, compassion, as we include more and more beings into our circle of concern, it can give rise to the highest intention, which is the willingness to involve ourselves in the actual process of liberating others. So going beyond the love that wishes for beings to be happy and have all the causes of happiness, going beyond the compassion that wishes beings to be free of suffering and all the causes of suffering, but with that mind that wishes to do something about it. It's a willingness to bear all the difficulties that come from getting involved with sentient beings, whether they're difficult or easy to be around, difficult or easy to help. But because of love and compassion, our mind is happy to act. There's a complete sense of engagement. I'm going to do something. I'm going to act. And this energy is going all in one direction to benefit others. Whereas we might think, how can we benefit others? My mind's a mess. I have my own problems that will get in the way. So we have to look towards those who have the strength of mind to go through the difficulties of helping others, who have the wisdom to know how to help others, who have the skill in knowing exactly the right thing to help others at the right time. As we cultivate these causes, this can give rise to bodhicitta, with the understanding that only an enlightened being can, without mistake, without error, truly help others be liberated from suffering and have only happiness. So with the highest intention, we're developing the mind that wishes to do just that. To become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Not just the friends of this life, the loved ones of this life, but all sentient beings who've been so kind to us in many lives. Recognizing that we are the same as all other sentient beings. Having compassion and love for ourselves. Knowing to be completely free of all suffering requires developing compassion and wisdom to its greatest extent. So we want to generate a strong desire to become enlightened. And from that state, be able to bring all other sentient beings to that state. And take a moment to rejoice in your efforts during this meditation. And dedicate the positive potentials you've placed on your mind stream to be of benefit to others until there are no suffering sentient beings in samsara at all. And take a moment to check in with your body again. Wiggling your fingers and toes. And now we'll join the others. So we can open our eyes again when you feel ready.
So try it again.
Hi, Ralph.
Good morning, everyone.
So the purpose of these kinds of meditations are really just about, cultivating, trying to think of ways to look at all beings from a different perspective. Just to kind of play with the idea that, okay, if it's possible that, our consciousnesses don't, that the only cause of consciousness is consciousness. So our consciousness has always existed and will never cease. So that means we've been around a while, and in every human life, we've had parents, and then eventually everybody takes a turn with everybody else. So that this sense of separateness we feel for, the vast majority of sentient beings, especially when you start thinking about mosquitoes and fleas and no-see-ums and it's like, okay. But it's this way of just looking at it from a different perspective and trying to first acknowledge that, sometimes we don't let affection in, so we need to work on that so we can think about, that we've received affection from all the beings that have been affectionate towards us in this life and in the, but and there have been beings like that in all previous lives, and feel some warmth from that. And then allowing, by working with those that we know, we kind of work with our families and develop the sense of, how kind our caregivers have been to us. And, and often our brothers and sisters have been really helpful through the school years and we had older ones. And if you're an older one, that you really were kind to your younger ones, all these kind of things. And allowing that sense of affection and appreciation to arise. And then trying to, extend that to your friends and, your family as an adult, with your partner and your children. And then you just keep trying to expand it out to your you know, to the friends, and then to the friends of, you know, when you were younger, and the friends that you'll probably have when you're older, and all this stuff, and just keep expanding it out so that we can really start to have this wish for happiness and, you know, freedom from suffering for everybody, no matter what relationship we have with them now. And this is the way we can develop that highest intention of bodhicitta. So with that in mind, let's read the four immeasurables. Maybe. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So if you've just joined us, take a moment to set your intention. I've had teachers say that if you don't set an intention at the beginning, you have nothing to dedicate at the end. So how are we doing? I'm practicing patience.
Doing well. How was your trip, Venerable Tendron? How was your drive?
Boring.
That's good.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Hello, where are you in Raleigh? You made it.
I made it. I'm
Good for
in.
you. Florida is a very boring ride because it's all flat.
Yep.
But I'm so glad that you made it in one piece. Great, great, great.
Yeah, that's how we like it.
Did you drive straight through, or did you take a break in
No, I
between?
can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
It's kind of irritating because it's only an 11-hour drive. So it's sort of like, it's just too far out of reach. So
I've made that drive a few times. I know.
yeah, it's, so anyway, there was more traffic than I would have wished for. But that's self-cherishing. I guess other people need to get around too. So, anyway, so I'm, you know, I'm being, you know, having that external condition of change, you know, in my face. So how about you? Are y'all having that experience of no change in your face? So trying to deal with this, understanding that the changes that we're going through are constant. They're not, I mean, it's always been like this. And it's just when we rub up against it, when it's something, you know, when there's some big change and it's of course affecting everybody, that, you know, it's somehow, there's a, I don't know, it's like we don't expect this kind of change, you know. And the reality is, as we're seeing, the conditions are such that we may have to make some of the changes we've experienced, some of the transitions we've already made, you know, the norm. And if we're practiced at just rolling with things, it's not so difficult to do. Because there's always a sense of it would be better if. You know, that's part of our cyclic existence suffering. It could be better if. You know? So this situation's not any different than any other situation we experience. The main difference for most of us is that we don't have such great conditions at the moment. Most of the world already had lousy conditions. For many of us, this is new to have these constraints on our life. It was very strange driving here and going, all right, I'm just not going to drink water because I really don't want to stop at the bathrooms. You know, I mean, the virus is just going wild all along the coast. You know, they're all on 95, you know, it's just sort of like, okay, so this is my new normal. And it, you know, I'm almost 65. That's not so easy. But it's just so interesting how we have the, you know, it's really just, we're experiencing this, you know, we have really good conditions. You know, most of us have, you know, what any Buddhist teacher would say is a precious human rebirth. And now we're experiencing one of those, you know, shifts in what our good conditions look like, because we still have good conditions. Because good conditions are relative. So being able to accept that even with these conditions, even with not knowing if it's going to change anytime soon at all, this might actually just be the way things are if we can't figure out a vaccine. You know, we forget that for most of human history, people have been vulnerable to illnesses that we had no cure for. This is part of our good conditions, is that we live in a time where there actually are interventions that can be done. And hopefully that will continue, but it might not. What a cheery subject. But it's such an excellent condition for really getting this sense of, you know, having compassion for all sentient beings, because we're all in the same boat. You know, it's kind of unmistakable that, you know, the vulnerability of this human body is something we share with all the other humans on the planet. You know, it's easier to ignore climate change, which also affects all the living beings on the planet. But the way to, sort of the antidote to despair is understanding that we can do something about it. Okay, I can't stand the fact that the tongue is crooked. So we can, those things we can remedy, you know, we can just remedy. Let's fix that. Okay, let's. But the antidote to suffering is bodhicitta. When we're trying to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, we're not hooked up with despair. We're actively, working on how to benefit. And we don't have to be out there, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, all that stuff. We have to start with our minds. We have to grow our compassion in our minds so that we're not hooked by self-cherishing, but instead turn every moment into an opportunity to, understand our connection with all sentient beings, instead of seeing others as, or even conditions as, the difficulties, recognizing it's the way we think about them is the difficulty. Recognizing that suffering usually arises in the mind when we're thinking about ourselves. Is when we even think about how when we feel sad for someone else, the sadness is in part because we can't fix it. We'd like it to just change, and we'd like to be able to do that. And that's about us. We keep turning it around, looking at us, which is why part of us don't have, many of us don't have a real skill with sitting with the suffering of others because we find it intolerable for ourselves. So this developing, really working on trying to cultivate great compassion, great love, regardless of what's in it for us, is really the way to counter despair. Because when you're not thinking about what a mess it is for me, I don't know what to do. If instead you're thinking about, at the very least, sending out loving kindness and compassion and energy so that every person that you see, have contact with, that you can lift them up a little bit. That doesn't mean to make them smile necessarily. It just means that they feel supported by your presence. Trying to come from the perspective of, how can I be beneficial in this very moment? And so right now, by studying the teachings, this is a way to be beneficial to others. This isn't just idle time that we're spending on ourselves. This is, a really good way to help us develop our minds in order to be able to be of more benefit to others. So it's really, I know it's somewhat counterintuitive to think that cherishing others reduces our own suffering. Not thinking about ourselves reduces our own suffering. Not worried about this or that reduces our own suffering. I mean, intellectually we get it, but we're really ingrained to those habits. So we really think there's, some benefit to it. What gets in our way?
Gets in the way of cherishing others?
Yeah.
I find that when I have a lot to do, I get absorbed in my own activities, and it's harder to see other people as other sentient beings as opposed to maybe obstacles or just to-do items.
Right. Yes, this is one of the problems, isn't it? Because we are in the habit of framing everything around ourselves, then when we get caught up in like our work, I mean, then others become this obstacle to our work. We just need to start to step back and be able to see how it's the way we frame it in our minds that makes this be the result. It's my work that I need to get done in order to get paid, in order not to be fired, and in order to do a good job, in order blah, 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 blah. Of course, all of these things are supposed to benefit sentient beings in some way. I mean, jobs don't exist just because we have to fill time. There's something that we're providing in some way. So trying to recognize when we're going to that place, I think Anthony described it very well, when we've just gotten, we're just working. And then, it's like, I can imagine myself without any problem, unfortunately, that you're sitting there and you're really involved in trying to prepare teaching. And then somebody calls or texts. And there's a part of me that just doesn't really want to look to see if it might be really important to do something now, because you're really in, what is it? What do we call it? We're in
the zone.
We're in the zone. That was not my generation, but that is exactly it. We're in the zone and we don't want to disrupt it, And so that's when we have to step back and go, yeah, but why? Why is that being in the zone important? Well, because it benefits people. So why am I ignoring this person? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean that sometimes we don't, in fact, have to, prioritize. We do have to prioritize. But we want to be able to be that, kind of flexible, really not tight person that can just assess. Oh, I can, that doesn't get thrown by that sound on the phone it makes when you get a text, but just sees it as an opportunity to, I can just look and see if this is something that needs to be addressed right now, where it would be really helpful for someone if I responded.
So, Venerable Tendron, it's interesting because I experienced this week exactly this, in that there were a few deaths of colleagues and illnesses, deaths of colleagues and clients, and I just could not bring myself to exhibit empathy and condolences and compassion for what they were experiencing. I mean, I literally physically turned away from it, even though I wasn't physically present with them. And I noticed it. I was kind of astounded by the reaction. And then I kind of recognized that this reaction was something that I had to do, perhaps for my own self-preservation, to some degree. I'm not sure. So I'm kind of wrestling a little bit with what you just presented to us. I get it and I recognize it. And I was wondering if you might be able to help me with that a little bit.
Well, it's really about understanding, and we have to go at our own pace. It's really important. But it's sort of like stepping back and being able to go, okay, how can this situation really hurt me more than them? The person that you're trying to be present for or offer condolences for. We have to really look at that. Oh, because it might send me to despair. Well, who's doing that? It's not the situation. It's because we are grasping it somehow, that somehow we should be able to like prevent this or fix it. Or we really want to look at what is it that we're holding on to that thinks that, I can't even go there because I will suffer too much if I do. Because it's probably a lie. We really think our fortress that we build around us protects us, when in fact, it adds to our suffering. Maybe not in that precise moment because we don't really understand what suffering is. But whenever we close our heart, that's not a skillful mind. It doesn't mean that we constantly have to put ourselves out there, because we do. We have to go at our own pace. We do, so we recognize certain situations. Oh, I can't handle that right now. But we want to try to take those situations and then reflect on all the aspects of it, of recognizing what is it that I think, why do I think that just being there for someone is somehow going to be harder for me than what they're experiencing? What is that? And really sit with that. Let it bubble up in us. And then if we think, oh, because I just get so depressed and so despairing, then we have to really look at what is the mind that gets that depressed and despairing. It's usually a mind that's really holding ourselves so dear, instead of having this realistic, we're not Buddhas, we can't fix it. It's not like we can end suffering in that way. Why can't we just end suffering? There's a question mark at the end of that.
Because we're in suffering?
Trying to unmute herself.
Because it's secular, and we're not out of cyclic existence, and until we become enlightened, we won't, be able to end suffering.
And when we become enlightened, we'll be able to end suffering for people?
No, because they have their own karma.
So this is something we have to get.
Suffering for ourselves, though, we'd be able to end it for ourselves.
Well, and also this is the only way we can actually lead others to do it for themselves. And we certainly impact each other, so we can, be a good example, a good model. We can be a good teacher. We can be a good condition, all sorts of ways that Buddhists can benefit and Bodhisattvas can benefit, But they can't literally just take our suffering. If they would have done that, we wouldn't be suffering. They just would have fixed it. Unfortunately, they can't do that. We have to, follow their example to achieve the same state that they're in. So being able to understand that, yes, we can sit with someone's suffering and know we can't fix it. That we have that limitation. And that everybody suffers. We don't have to fall apart over anybody's suffering, because it's not the end. No situation is the end all be all. When we're in the midst of suffering, it feels that way. But when we're supporting someone in their suffering, we can use our wisdom to know that this will pass. But we can be supportive during its intensity. Does that make sense? We can use what we understand about the teachings. That what we're experiencing, we created the cause for. And once we learn how to quit creating the cause for that suffering will end. But that doesn't mean we don't have compassion for each other, because we suffer greatly. But there's also nothing to be despairing about, because the suffering that's manifesting is the result of our past actions. It doesn't have any more meaning than that. But because we buy into the whole storyline, So when we lose our mother, we lose our father, we lose a friend, we lose a partner, We lose, you know, our grandparents. We lose a coworker, you know, whatever. I mean, all those things. We've lost every sentient being that exists again and again and again and again and again and again. The real suffering is in our minds. It's holding, it's self-cherishing, and it causes a manifestation of all this suffering. So being able to step back, even when it's us that is the, you know, experiencer of some horrible suffering, if we can step back and think, okay, this is due to causes and conditions. You know, may I use this to support my, you know, my mind, my determination to change my mind, develop wisdom so I can get out of this trap. And we don't want to sit there with someone else and placate them because it's not true. They're suffering. We know what that's like. But we don't have to go to despair because we know there's an end to this suffering. Yes, Francesca.
Yes. So once you've accepted suffering as part of the human condition,
The samsara condition, yeah.
samsara condition, this precious human rebirth, and if you say to yourself, excuse me.
Well, I mean, not everybody has a precious human rebirth.
Okay, but say you know you feel like you're one of the fortunate ones, even be here being introduced to the Dharma, and you say, wow, you know, this is my opportunity to help others and, you know, generate bodhicitta and all, and you don't have the wish to get out of cyclic existence. You know, you say to yourself, you know, I'm really not, you know, I don't really want to be a Buddha. I want to continue to stay in some, you know, in suffering, and you learn to accept suffering. What's wrong with that? I mean, I feel like,
yeah, you can stay. I mean, you've done it since beginningless time. You can continue that way, but you can't help anybody in their suffering because you haven't figured it out. We can end suffering. And until we know how, we can't really teach someone else how to end their suffering.
but the Dharma is helping. Yes.
So all along the way, we can be of benefit.
Benefit.
And Buddhas can be more benefit because they have no ignorance, they're, you know, so they can do, you know, they don't have any of this junk we still have in our minds. So it's not about, we do need to learn how to accept the suffering of samsara in the sense of thinking, you know, that there's no reason to resist it. You just remedy it when you can, and you accept it when you can't. You know, you just don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm. So
and we can be a model of that for others.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't change the fact that we can be empathetic, compassionate, you know, and be there for each other when someone's completely drowning in grief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just that we can protect ourselves with wisdom as opposed to building a fortress.
So enlightenment, when you're working towards, you know, becoming enlightened for the ultimate goal of getting out of cyclic existence.
That's not the goal. You want to become enlightened, omniscient, in order to be able to help others free themselves from suffering.
In this life.
In any life.
In any
life. As long
life.
as it takes.
So if you can become enlightened now
that's
to help
the
others.
Best, yes.
So that's not the ultimate goal to end cyclic existence, to become enlightened. The enlightenment is.
Well, you could say ultimately, although ultimate's not the best word to use, but you know, you could certainly say, you know, nothing wrong with having no suffering sentient beings left in samsara. That would be part of the benefit of everybody being enlightened. There are no new beings being created because our consciousness has always existed. So wouldn't it be nice if all those consciousnesses were experiencing bliss and they're not creating there's no foundation for the creation of suffering.
And they would be still existing on this plane.
No, I
Or
don't
not.
know how to describe what an enlightened it looks like. I mean, that's why we talk about Pure Land. So as soon as you become enlightened, you have your own Pure Land. But that's only because you need to, you have to have a form body in order to be able to teach those who cannot interact with you just with the mind. They need a form body.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Mm-hmm. How are we doing? Any other thought? Nicole, did you want to, I can't tell whether you're muted or not. There's something in the way.
I am muted. I guess you read my mind because I do have a question. So as you often say, in difficult situations, it's like the better the payoff is. Would this time also be considered that because of the nature of suffering, like COVID and all this stuff, or is that just our collective karma?
Well, it's our collective karma.
Yes.
So it's part of a degenerate time, so, but what's really wonderful about these situations, if we've met the Dharma in these situations, trying to benefit others during difficult times, there's more merit in it because you're overcoming more obstacles to do it. You're willing to tolerate more difficulties. You're bearing hardship in order to benefit others, like all the doctors and nurses and, janitors and, respiratory therapists and, everybody that works in a hospital or a health facility treating COVID patients and every other sickness that's, requires hospitalization. But those who are taking care of infectious diseases are putting themselves at risk for catching it as well. So they're just, there's so many different levels of, of virtuous attitude and activities when you take on all those risks and you're willing to do it, for the benefit of someone else. And many have to sacrifice seeing their own families just because of their job. Whereas others get to have that lovely feeling of having their whole family with them all the time because they can work from home without putting their families at risk. So it's quite the process. Don't you wish you could hear Anthony and Francesca talking? Because I always feel like they're having a little discussion group that might be beneficial.
Sorry, we do often discuss
to.
things. But I'm listening.
You have something special to share?
She asked me if I thought it was a silly question. And I said, we were discussing the enlightenment aspect,
There's no silly question.
Yeah.
There are many silly actions and thoughts. There's no silly question trying to get us out of our confusion,
Yeah. I have a really big obstacle, several of them actually. One is I'm still grappling with the idea of rebirth, and also beginningless mind. And so as a consequence of that,
they're the same issue.
yeah, and I have, an obstacle for me is doubt. Doubt is still prevalent. And that I'm feeling like I'm stalled, like I'm having difficulty making
You're letting the
spiritual
doubt have the
progress.
power.
Yeah.
What you have, sometimes we just have to set aside the doubt. And that means accepting, I don't know. Instead of getting hooked by, I don't know. Because you're not going to know for quite some time. It's one of those things that we can't prove or disprove.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can disprove it.
Well,
How do you disprove it?
For example, if you have doubt regarding rebirth, for example, it makes the idea of, generating, in other words, putting yourself out in a way that could be harmful to you in this life, let's say,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's sort of where
Because
I'm at.
self-preservation is the ultimate self-cherishing.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was very
It's
deeply
not-
ingrained.
That's why we need to set aside our doubt and accept the I don't know, because we're not going to know until we have the ability to remember our past lives. So develop Kamabhati so you can have proof.
I will
So it's
probably
not that
have
the
to do
doubt
that.
is not answerable, but you can only prove it to yourself, but you can't, I mean, this is one of those things. This is a limitation of the fact that all the way we've developed our wisdom has been with physical things, and the mind's not physical.
Venerable Tendron, building on Anthony's question, Anthony, taller
The
than
other
Anthony.
yes.
Let's keep it going. How do you feel, or what's, I suppose, what are people's perspectives or
Just ask.
perspective of teachers on looking at maybe like what science is saying about consciousness and like their findings? Like
Oh, well, His
non-locality of
Holiness
consciousness.
supports all these conferences.
Okay, so it's okay to look into that as a
Well,
way
in
to
fact, it
maybe get over
supports
the doubt.
Buddhism. If you look, they haven't been able to pinpoint the mind.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to bring that up, because I have been reading about it, because I struggle with that doubt as well, or trying to imagine
Everybody
what a
does.
rebirth would look like. Mm-hmm.
I think other than people who have strong recollection of something about previous lives or connections with people, and they feel that karmic connection really profoundly, have doubts. And we weren't raised in a culture that assumes that. And we have to look at that. We have to recognize that we are also responding to the fact that we grew up in a culture that doesn't believe it, that thinks someone else made us. That's our culture. We're serving a superior being in our culture, and will be judged at the end. So if you're raised from that background, it's a very different picture. Funnily enough, though, the actions we're supposed to cultivate are the same. The mind of love and compassion and respecting our parents and, all these things. So it's not that the way we behave is that different, but the way we explain how we got here and what happens when it ends is different. And then scientists who might have or anybody that may have no spiritual, Buddhism isn't theistic. It's also an atheist religion. There's no God in it, creator God kind of person. So, so we have a different view of how we came together. And our view is causes and conditions, law of cause and effect, dependent arisings. Just like the physical universe, the mind is dependent upon previous moments of mind. So we develop our habits, but it doesn't end because there's nothing to end. There's no physical thing there that deteriorates, that falls apart and ceases to work. But does it end? Do physical things actually end?
No, they do not. Can't be destroyed or created.
Right.
That's correct. Energy cannot be destroyed or created.
So according to Buddhism, that's right. And Buddhism agrees with that there's, all this physical matter, there's always been the stuff that in fact form is made of. That's also always existed. It is our cause and effect. We create the causes for our world to look like it does. Karma only makes sense with past and future lives. That's sort of where I come from it. That's the angle I come from it. If I believe in past and future lives, everything makes sense to me. Karma makes sense to me. The teachings make sense to me. And so I'm going with that. Do I have proof? No. Do I have doubt? Sure. Because I have no proof. Oh, absolutely. You know, it's just that I'm not averse to something that explains everything. You know, I've actually had people ask me, oh, that's convenient that it explains everything. Well, that's what scientists are trying to do. They're trying to explain everything. And Buddhism is just saying you're leaving out something that's non-physical, that you can't measure with all those machines. And if you would just incorporate that into it, you'd be a lot further in explaining everything. But I think, you know, we can look at certain things, and the only, to me, this is just me, I'm a Buddhist nun. This is what I have bought into this. So, you know, is that, you know, all the differences between children within the same families, to me, the only thing that explains that is karma. That we bring our habit energies with us, you know, that we're not starting from scratch. The fact that we meet people sometimes and just have an instant connection or instant aversion. When I arrived at Chin Racing, there was a person that would not be in the same car with me, in the same room with me, in the same anything with me. For 2 years. From the moment I got there. It passed. You know, it's interesting, you know, it's just, so it's not, you know, it's just a matter of looking at the big picture and not letting doubt stop you from looking. You know, that's why we have to kind of set aside our doubt, because of course we have doubt. We can't prove it. But does not being able to prove it benefit us in any way? To me, karma is all about discovering our power. We have the power to change our experience of the future. We have the power to help each other.
Well, you know, skepticism is, or doubt in some ways, I don't consider it necessarily a bad thing, because it keeps you open
I'm
to
not saying it's a bad thing.
explore. Or
You're the one who said
yeah,
you're stalled. That's
true.
when it becomes a bad thing. So, you know, yeah, you can present my argument for me, but that's exactly right. There's nothing wrong with doubt. We have to recognize, though, when it's just stalled us. It's not leading us to wisdom. It's keeping us stuck. And that's when we need to just set it aside for a while. Because, and also face what we cannot prove. We really can't prove yes or no on that one. And machines are not going to tell us. We have to have realizations. And right now, maybe we feel like, oh, I don't know if I could trust my realizations. Well, yeah, probably not. But, you know, someday, if we keep doing the practices. So as beginners, we need to understand we don't know enough yet. You know, until we really, you think about what the Buddha did, the Shakyamuni Buddha, you know, 6 years in meditation, all those years of austerities, you know, have you practiced that hard? This is the thing. If we really want to know, we have to do the work. So we have to accept our own limitations, what we're able to do in this life, what we're willing to do in this life, all those things. And so that's going to have limitations until karma ripens. You know, you might accumulate enough merit to suddenly, no big deal. I'm going to go live in the cave until I'm enlightened and succeed. You know, But you know, like what Lama Tsongkhapa, how many millions prostrations did he do? If you read any of his text, you know that this was not somebody who wasn't doing any work or didn't understand the teachings. We have to accept the not knowing aspect of any path. Doesn't mean there's never knowing, but you can't just know it all from the beginning. It doesn't work that way. We're talking about the mind here. If it was physical, we'd be able to prove it. You know, with just each more sophisticated machine. But according to Buddhism, it's not physical, and we don't have machines that measure non-physicality. You know, it's more like the artist who defines things by negative space. So what's missing? Well, consciousness is missing, according to Buddhism. You could get down to the quarks and whatever smaller than quarks and whatever, but you know, it's never going to be consciousness. But I read all sorts of physical, you know, about physics and quantum physics and all the things about mind. I read all that stuff. I think it's important. How much I understand is another story entirely. But, you know, we do our best. But this is why it's so helpful to step back and keep kind of trying to look at the big picture. Okay, so there's past and future lives. And so consciousness has a cause, and everything physical, everything with form has a cause, you know, and they're different. That, you know, physical things cannot cause something non-physical, which pretty much physical stuff shows us that. We have a lot of knowledge now about the physical stuff. But one of the things we keep coming to is that an observer changes everything. What does the observer bring? Consciousness. That's the only one that's different. So, you know, we need to look at that. But I'm not a scientist, you know. So I agree that from doubt comes Vesna. Are you raising your hand?
Yes, but go ahead, please finish.
I'm never going to finish. I do blah, blah, blah.
I'd like to go back to that question of, you know, protecting yourself sufficiently so that you don't feel threatened and you can act out of compassion.
Okay, so first it's letting go of the notion of self-sufficiency. We're not that.
What do you mean self-sufficiency? Sorry.
Didn't you say self-sufficiency?
No. So, I'm sorry. I don't remember the name of a person that actually said, you know, that some of his friends and acquaintances, there were some deaths, and
Ralph, yes.
he could not really be there for them because it was too much for him.
Well, because out of a sense of self-preservation.
Self-preservation. So, you know, I remember when my children were small, I was very sensitive. You know, I had to actually close my nose in order to be able to change their diapers. Otherwise, I would vomit and they would, you know, I couldn't do it. So I just had to do that. I had to protect myself.
So that's a good example of recognizing your limitations.
Right.
And remedying it. Okay.
Okay. So my question is, you know, when we feel, first of all, I actually realize now that I really don't understand clearly what compassion is. It's feeling of wishing others, you know, free of suffering, wishing for them well-being and no suffering. But it's also action that comes from that feeling. Is that correct? Or is
no, I mean, it starts with just that wish that someone be free of suffering.
What about the actions? I actually read a little bit about it, And I got very confused. Somewhere I read compassion is not feeling at all. It's a compassionate action. And you know,
Well,
never thought
the
like,
compassionate action this is where you really have to know your jargon. And so, you know, it's like feeling in Buddhism is pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Okay? So then you start to get into the emotions, you know, that's how we use the word for feeling in English, you know, but so it gets very tricky. So we have to just be careful. Now, what we want to cultivate is the compassion that a mother might feel for her child, where they want to be able to do something to eliminate the suffering for their child. You know, so that goes beyond mere compassion. Mere compassion is just that wish. But, you know, this is why we talk about when we're trying to cultivate bodhicitta, generating this intention, you know, that I'm going to do something about this. You know, it's like when people discover injustice and they decide to be an activist towards change. So they're going, you know, they've gone beyond just that recognition. Compassion has wisdom, you know, compassion is this recognition that we suffer, you know, and that others suffer, you know, and then it adds on this extra bit of wishing, you know, this is what the compassionate part is, you know, wishing they were not suffering. Then you want that mind to be what drives your actions.
right.
Now we have limitations. We have to recognize those limitations.
Because sometimes truly if compassion is strong, or perhaps empathy, and if we
Or
truly,
sympathy, yeah.
or sympathy, if we truly can feel majority of the suffering, it can be very overwhelming. It can really be more damaging.
Well, and that's as if the suffering's happening to you. There's no, you know, we really just need to, you know, being able to do that helps us understand that we're no different from each other. That, you know, someone else's suffering is really not different from our own suffering, that ability to empathize. But if we don't take a step back and realize, but their suffering isn't my suffering. I'm not suffering in the moment. So I'm the one who can be supportive in this moment because this suffering is not happening to me.
Right.
Okay.
That's actually very, very good point, very good way to look, because sometimes, to me at least, it happens that I forget that there is a borderline, you know, that and it just truly is overbearing, and actually then I
Then it's no help. You're not able to, it's all about you. I can't handle this.
It becomes all about me, and I choose self-protection, withdraw, and just leave it. Yes, thank you.
Yep. So this is what we want to work on. Recognizing we do this and realizing we're doing it to ourselves.
Right.
By the way we're thinking about it. Because, you know, we think, oh, by my self-preservation, the truth is someone else's suffering isn't going to hurt you. It's the way we're thinking about it that hurts us. Because the suffering isn't happening to us. So we have to get very precise about these things. Now, Faye has her hand up. Did you want to, is it relevant to this?
It's kind of related, but not really.
Okay, just a second then. So Vesna, is that good? Is that a start on your question? Okay. All right, Faye, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. So in the following on the thing about compassion, so I've been like, I'm wondering at what point when we're trying to benefit someone, can it end up hurting them? Like, so I'm helping.
Almost at every point. This is why we have to become enlightened, because we don't know what we're doing.
Right. Because so basically I'm, you know, helping this family, giving food and sometimes I pay rent. But then I was talking to someone, they're saying maybe you're giving them a crutch, like you could be hurting them in some way, like meaning they could be dependent on you and whatnot, essentially hurting them. So I don't know what to think about, how to think about that.
That's something that you have to reflect on. You can take somebody else's point of view and go and check it out. You know, like the truth is, some people believe we should be independent, self-sufficient, and that we're totally capable of that in every moment of our lives, you know, up once we've been raised, you know. The Buddha said, we're never independent. We're totally dependent. So we're all benefiting constantly from the efforts of others. So we have to look at, you know, yes, we can certainly be an enabler, as the, jargon puts it, in terms of not helping someone learn how to take care of some basic needs for themselves. Some people cannot learn that. Some people have mental difficulties or physical difficulties that prevent them from being able to fulfill those things, you know, so that, you know, so others have to help it, or it's not going to happen, you know. So we have to develop within ourselves this ability to really look, you know. And so if someone points out something and you think, oh, I haven't thought of it that way, then that's your opportunity to look, not to take their word for it, but to really start assessing, okay, so is that true, what they're saying? And it may not be true. It may be because they come in with this preconceived notion about what does it mean to be able to take care of yourself. So you just have to look. And we do make mistakes, you know. So it's a matter of, you know, it's trial and error. You know, we make mistakes. This is why it's so important to reflect on what we do, to not just do it, not just reflect before the fact. You know, we reflect before the fact, we put something into action, and then we reflect again to say, okay, how'd that go? Where's my mind? How's my mind? Am I doing this for selfish reasons after all? Do I discover like, oh, I'm really annoyed because they didn't say thank you? Or, you know, we want to look and just see, you know, are we getting resentful, you know, all those things. We need to look. Am I stretching myself too far because it just makes me angry? So I've gone too far and now I have to really back up. You know, there are all sorts of things we have to look at. Am I really helping them? You know, like I suspect that any, you know, conversation with someone over an hour is probably too long. You know, I use, and this, my theory of this is that therapists don't do it. You know, that there's a limit to how much talking about something is helpful. Because we tend to just start the story over. And what are we doing? We're rehearsing all sorts of unhelpful, unskillful attitudes of mind. You know, so we can definitely, being compassionate doesn't mean, I'm sorry, you can have my life and do whatever you will. I mean, that's what bodhicitta is about eventually, but it always has wisdom. You know, the person that throws themselves in the fire to feed the tiger cubs knows that they'll just get a new body, that the mind will not end. And they've reached a certain level of compassion and wisdom to be able to do that without any fear at all, because self-preservation doesn't arise with them. They know that self-preservation is about the mind. That if we truly want to practice self-preservation, we'll take care of our mind, because the body doesn't matter.
Venerable?
Yes.
Is skillful means something that comes only with the omniscient mind, or is that a quality that one develops?
We can develop it over time. It will not be perfected until we have omniscience. But we certainly develop our wisdom, don't we? You know, like you learn with your kids. I can imagine that everybody's a parent starts to develop skills, you know, over time that, oh, well, you know, this child needs this way to be encouraged. This child needs a different way to be encouraged. This child to, you know, we learn, and that, yes, all of that. Now, thinking that we're absolutely right about anything is probably not wisdom. So, because we're not omniscient. We are ignorant of things. We don't know what some other person's past lives, what stuff they're bringing with them. You know, so but we can get better and better at skillful means. No doubt about it. And one of the big things of that is removing self-cherishing. But it also means increasing our wisdom, really understanding that compassion, wishing someone to be free of suffering doesn't mean you just give them what they want. If that were true, none of us would be suffering. We all chase after what we want. And in some lives, we get a lot of it. Does it make us happy? Apparently not. So, you know, we need to bring that information into our decisions about how we're going to help someone. You know, we have to keep bringing the whole picture in, not just parts of it in that moment. So yes, we need to recognize when our limits are such that we're too tired, too depressed, too, you know, whatever it is, to be much use to someone else in that moment. We need to know that. But it doesn't mean we can't work with our minds in order to have that happen less and less. You know? And it's, you know, that's also an opportunity to work on purification, to kind of go, you know, I'm really sorry I have not spent my time well before now that I'm not in a, you know, not further along. You know, because we all, this is one of our great qualities. You know, most of the time we regret when we can't help. We don't like not being able to help. That's one of our wonderful qualities. Yes, Ralph.
Venerable Tendron, you're hitting all cylinders for me this morning, because you just struck another one that I'm having difficulty with. In the fact that even purification, when I approach purification practice, where I'm really looking to have compassion and empathy for myself, that too becomes overwhelming, where I actually have to turn away from it because it feels too painful to face my own stuff.
Well, and that's one of the problems, is not being able to just let yourself be horrified. I mean, sometimes, you know, like when I look at my stuff, when I'm trying to purify, there are moments that I'm trying to purify that I am horrified by what I've done, what I've thought, what I've said, horrified. And if you could see what my mind looked like when I was helping take care of my dad sometimes, it was just like, it was just horrible, you know? And then there's, you know, I have suffered a lot, you know? I mean, and there are times when I think about the stuff, you know, I'll think of things that people have said to me, you know, things that my mother said or my father said, or actions that happened or didn't happen, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm totally wounded all over again, you know, and it's just, and it's, you know, and being able to really allow myself to feel the heartbreak of that, not because it all comes out of ignorance, you know, no one hurts us out of wisdom. They hurt us out of ignorance. You know, so all of our suffering, the tragedy is it's totally unnecessary if we would develop wisdom. But we, you know, we have to learn how to do that. If it came naturally to us, none of us would be in this boat. So we have to, you know, so this is our opportunity to really have incredible loving compassion for our parents when they made the mistake, all our wounds, every wound that when we bring to mind, we still feel wounded, you know, that's an opportunity. That's where it becomes a condition to where we can really develop the sense of suffering and samsara, and that we're not alone, that everybody experiences this, and that it's terrible. But there's something we can do about it. And what we can do about it is within our minds. You know, it's learning how to let go of past harms. It's learning how to understand that we're all interdependent, that if we experience a harm, we created the cause for that. So what does that mean? Someone else felt that bad from something we did. And do we have to feel guilty about that? No, we have to try to help each other quit doing it. You know, it isn't about, you know, it's that recognition that, oh yes, I can keep doing the same thing I've been doing since beginningless time and end up in this mess again and again and again and again and again. Or I can use these good conditions to keep, to let go and not be so self-enmeshed with what's going on. You know, understand that what's happening to us, the beginnings of it started eons ago. No big deal. How we feel about it is from habits from beginningless time. No big deal. Let me work on more of developing a stable mind, a mind that doesn't get pulled around by, you know, external circumstances, a mind that doesn't get pulled around by my negative habits of mind. And understand that we're all trying to figure it out, and very few of us have good tools. So being gentle with ourselves about, you know, not having all these good tools or not practicing them much, you know, and being able to laugh at ourselves about how, I mean, you know, and sometimes we just have to be seriously motivated, you know, and by that mean, I really want to be happy. I'm really tired of finding everything so hard. So what do I need to do? You know, and look at the teachings from that angle. Y'all all look like I feel looking at the stuff I'm supposed to be taking care of this weekend. Really? More work to do? Not all of you. All I want to do this weekend is sleep. I want to sleep and wake up on Wednesday and discover it done. You know, guess what? It's not going to happen. I'm going to have to make this happen. And that's the same with our minds. You know, we have to do the work. We have to recognize every time we're falling into that self-cherishing and recognize that's not helpful. We have to be accepting that we're not going to get it right away. We might not get it in 20 years, you know, but we just keep trying. Well, then every time we have some wonderful compassionate mind arise, or kind mind, or generous mind, or patient mind, or whatever mind that arises that helps ourselves and others, rejoice. You know? And if somebody needs help with that, send them little gifts that remind them, you know, little things on their text. You can do it. Help each other, you know. And let the affection in. One of the things we're not so good in the West about is really letting our self-worth in. Just like you think other beings are worthwhile, you know, helping, you too are worthwhile helping. No matter how much of a jerk you might have been or still are, no matter how many mistakes you've made, no matter how selfish you can be, you have the potential to be a Buddha. You can't be more valuable than that. You know? And all Buddhas started where we do. You know? We can't compare ourselves to each other. That doesn't help. Plus, we can't read their minds. They may look good on the outside. I wear robes. It doesn't change anything, does it? I have to still fight with my mind. You know, of course, I almost forgot it for this trip. I was saying, oh, I'm just going to be doing physical things. It's going to be hot. I'm going to be sweating. I'm just not going to bring my robes. And I thought, well, you're going to teach. So I could have shown up in my shorts and my work shirt, and I would have been horrified. So I did forget the key to the place. So I forgot that. Fortunately, a neighbor had a key, but I had to figure all that out on the road. So, and one of the nuns who lives here said, "Don't worry, I will, send over a set of robes if you forget them." See, we're interdependent, and being able to accept help and give help helps us cultivate this mind of understanding that the roles we play for each other, change all the time. And that's a good thing, because that means we really can direct things towards more and more skillful actions with more and more, good results. And then we have to take advantage of those good results, like this, we have good conditions. And then when we have crummy conditions, we also have to accept, oh, well, right now my conditions are crummy. Oh, and receive help. But being able to step back and recognize, no big deal. The big deal is working on our minds so we keep responding with more and more evenness, more acceptance, not getting all hooked up into it as if it's, so important. What's important is developing the good qualities of mind and developing wisdom, which is a good quality of mind.
Thank you for that, Venerable Tendron. And so this brings me back to kind of the discussion earlier, the existential question of, of rebirth and so on, and whether to, quote, believe it, unquote, or not believe, or to accept or not accept. And see, to me, that's enough right there, what you just said. To be happy and to help others be happy, to comfort ourselves and comfort others. That almost seems to be enough right there. But I too, I'm drawn to this intellectual exercise of what's the purpose, what's the end game. Do I need to believe or not believe in some ultimate?
Why do you think that we're attracted to that?
I'm not quite certain, but I do know this. And in spending, I don't know how much countless time doing this exercise, I came across a quote from Blaise Pascal, the mathematician and philosopher who also turned out, it appears to be quite the gambler. And he said he doesn't know of God's existence necessarily, but on the chance that God does exist, he's going to go ahead and live his life as if God did. And to me, I think that's almost enough. It really is enough. Let the rest play out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, it's just sort of like, okay, if I can keep practicing in this way and become a better person, because I've already had some evidence that that's possible, that that's doable, then I want to keep going with it. And if these teachings say there's a way to end suffering, that's, hey, and it's under our control. We just have to get more skilled. That sounds good to me. I'd rather take that than just say, oh, it's all random, nothing, good luck with that. That's just so depressing to me. I can't stand it. If that's true, what difference does it make, whatever we do? I'm not going to pack. Maybe I'll just burn it down. Won't have to worry about it. I mean, it just doesn't make any, that doesn't help me at all. May be true, but it doesn't help me at all. It doesn't reduce my suffering at all.
Venerable Tendron, I wanted to ask, clarify something. In the karma class, did you say that the karma we generate in this life ripens in the next life, or
No.
in this
No.
life?
No, it could be a couple of eons from now.
but the karma we are experiencing now is ripening from a past life.
From a past life. Could be eons ago. Yeah, it's a big picture. It really is vast. You know, this is why karma is considered an extremely hidden object, and only a Buddha can really, only an enlightened being can know all the causes and effects, because you have to have omniscience. Because we're so interconnected. It's, you know, think about all the shared karma we have. You know, the way the planet looks, the way it operates.
Okay, but shared karma meaning like we just have similar karma, not that our karma is impacting each other, right?
Right. It's not, it's just that, yes, we have the collective karma, means we all created the cause to exist in a time of this pandemic.
Okay, got it.
And it wouldn't have to be this pandemic, it's just any pandemic. And then it all, you know, it's basically that the karma ripens when all the conditions come together. You know, the cause is that karmic seed. Its ripening is all the other conditions that have to come together for it to ripen. And that can take eons, or never at all if we purify and destroy our good, our merits with anger. But then it all stops when we realize how things exist directly, have an experience of emptiness, because there's no longer a foundation for all the garbage to be based upon. We built, you know, worlds of suffering from our ignorance.
And the conditions that ripens it is like the negative mind, or
all sorts of things. It can be, you know, like, you know, there's this, you know, some sentient being had the karma to develop this virus. You know, and then it spread. The virus itself is alive. You know, there's just so many things that are happening. So we just can't, you know, we can't go there until we have many more realizations to really try to, you can't work it out. You know, it's just that, you know, if it's like if you have the karmic potential to be an alcoholic, okay, but you never meet alcohol, you never come in contact with it, that karmic potential to be addicted to alcohol cannot ripen, because the condition is not there. You have to have alcohol for it to be there.
okay, thank you.
No.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
But karma can also ripen in this lifetime if you, I'm not thinking clearly today. So you have, you know, let's say you steal something, all right? And then you could have something stolen from you in this lifetime as well, right?
Yeah, but that's probably from previous lifetimes of stealing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
it's possible. They say anything that we've done with intensity,
yeah,
you know, might ripen in this.
yeah. I see. Okay.
You know, both virtues and non-virtues. But it's more likely, you know, when you think about it, a yogi, someone who's really trained their minds, and their mind's very powerful, it's able to hold its focus on its object, all of those things, their actions have a lot more power. Ours is so totally distracted, we can't follow through on any thought, much less action, you know, so it's, you know, it's all very choppy, our actions and our thinking. So, you know, it's our habits that are causing so much trouble, because we just repeat it again and again and again, like distraction. We repeat that. We're very good at distraction, you know. So, you know, but, you know, when you develop your focus and you're able to like not forget, you know, like I'm not going to forget to respond with compassion to every sentient being I encounter today. And you don't forget that. You know, the mind of compassion that you have all day is really powerful, as opposed to the mind that occasionally, you know, a glimmer of compassion goes through. So it's like that. All right, is this a good time to stop?
Well, yes, Venerable Tendron. I also wanted to remind everybody, you know, about the amazing movie about His Holiness the Dalai Lama that is still available today to be watched for free. And so that's the Great 14th I just had it, .com, I think it is. So it's available to watch. The Great, TheGreat, 14th.com. Okay, and it's a global virtual premiere, and it's really quite lovely story.
Can you repeat that, Nicole? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yes. It's The Great 14th, TheGreat, 14th.com. Okay, so you can register to watch it, and I think it's available till this evening.
Well, it's available till something like
the 28th something.
Today at midnight Pacific Standard Time, or Pacific Daylight Time.
Yeah, something. And
it's
so it shows
3 a.m. our time.
Okay.
We watched it. It was excellent. 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 I would highly recommend it. Absolutely.
Where is it available?
I'm sorry?
Where is it available? What website?
No, so you have to go to this website, the Great 14th.
Oh, that's the website. All right.
And click on Global Virtual Premiere, and then you'll get the information to watch it. And, you know, also to remember this is how our teachers inspire us, you know, we need to continuously be inspired, right? And His Holiness and his life story is a wonderful example of that. So thank you.
And I have just one, I guess maybe question or even just a comment. Venerable Tendron, when you said, oh, look at you two, you have your own little private study group. And we do, you know, and it's really beneficial for us because we do bounce off each other quite a bit, you know, a lot during our days. But I was just wondering if anybody would be interested in joining a study group.
Well, I can tell you that you'll benefit a lot more by having discussion groups while I'm not teaching.
Okay.
That if you have discussions while I'm teaching, you're missing.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, we try not to do that. I understand that. I'm just saying,
you know,
if anybody's interested.
It's really good to follow up any teaching with a conversation with someone. I would really encourage you to use the technology we have to do that with folks, you know, like Francesca's suggesting, you know, start study groups on your own. And it could be spontaneous, you know, it can just be you email a bunch of people or you ask on the chat thing, anybody want to discuss this issue of blah, 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 you know, later. And then if some question comes up, you know, that there's a debate about, you know, you can bring into class and, you know, and I'll try my best to give the Buddha's point of view, you know, according to my understanding. But, you know, we have to, you know, I really encourage that. You know,
in Kopan, we did that after our teachings, and it was really wonderful. It was a great experience having a study group.
I know it's you know, we had to do it. You know, when I was studying, we had a discussion group every day. Did people want to go? No, of course not. But, you know, but we had to, so we did. Nuns are very difficult. We're obstinate, you know. So, but, you know, there's, you know, no question. But a lot of you have each other's emails, you know, find them out, you know, and start, you know, FaceTime chats or Zoom chats. I mean, they're free for the first 40 minutes, and that's probably long enough, you know. So, I mean, it's
yeah, I just got a few messages.
Has groups Skype.
Yeah, and I'll help organize it if you guys set up the time and the day you want to do it, and I'll just give you a link and you show up.
Yeah. Or they can create their own links and learn about that. Everybody should learn how to do these things so that you can, so like if Nicole gathers from the chat, who's interested and then sends out an email to, folks or to the member, I don't know. But it's just, it's like no one person has to be responsible for running it. These can just be spontaneous conversations that come up after a class because there was some subject or, a particular interest that came up.
So the best time is right after the class. Would you say the best time is right after we have a teaching?
Well, it's usually freshest in the mind.
Right.
But y'all all arrange to have lunch at home. And as you're eating lunch, discuss the teaching.
Okay.
They're fun ways to do it. I mean, it's just, of course, you're talking to a nut. I love to talk about the Dharma, so it's my favorite way to spend all my time. But I find most people benefit. You just have to be careful. You have to understand everybody's going to have, different levels of knowledge. And that doesn't mean the person who has less level of knowledge doesn't have as much wisdom as, it's just, it doesn't mean that someone's going to be right. You just discuss and come up with new questions because it's from that process that we develop wisdom. They say discussion, whenever you're taking these classes, they say, the Degeshis all say, that most of our learning comes from the discussion about it because we're trying to integrate this into the way we think. And we just, and so that's going to be different according to where we are, but that's what we need to do.
So Nicole, we just got getting a lot of people, like it looks like maybe 9 or something. A bunch of people have been saying they're interested. Would anybody want to stay like today? Is there any way to put that together?
Why don't you, the people interested, stay on, we'll do our dedications. I'll leave because I can.
I can actually make Francesca, you a co-host, and then we can leave the meeting, and anyone who wants to stay on can. Absolutely. Okay.
Well, we're going to dedicate. Okay, so we're going to dedicate, and one of the things we can rejoice in is all this enthusiasm and discussions. That's great. So that is that effort, that willingness to, like, I'm going to do, try to keep working on understanding this stuff. It's fabulous. So we'll recite the dedication verses. So rejoice in your efforts. Remember whatever intention you set at the beginning or the motivation at the beginning. Opportunity. Everybody, it's still present up there, right? Okay. So now we're just dedicating that. We're dedicating our positive potentials we place on our mind stream to, not exhaust until there's no suffering sentient beings at all. So we're making these wishes that it can be used in all these ways. Can people mute? Okay. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, Until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.